Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface. But if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges that Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode. There's nothing quite like scheduling a holiday. The anticipation as the departure date approaches, packing up the night before, setting off to the chosen destination, whether new or familiar. Then there's the excitement of arriving at the location you will call home for a few days or weeks. But what if things were to take a dark turn? What if the accommodation you've booked isn't as peaceful and relaxing as you thought it would be? What if perhaps there are inexplicable sounds in the night, or you feel an unseen presence in the room with you? Hotels are transitional spaces by nature, seeing any number of people pass through, each visiting for their own reasons, whether it's a family holiday, coming to town for a wedding, a funeral, or on business. Some people even stay on a more long-term basis while they find a new home or rebuild their lives after a tragedy. Over the course of decades, it's easy to imagine the vast assortment of personalities and the wide range of emotions felt by hotel guests. This ever-changing, revolving door of temporary inhabitants lends itself well to drama, tragedy, and hauntings. You may have heard of Salem, Massachusetts, made famous for its witch trials held in the late 1600s. It's no surprise, given its already paranormal reputation, that within the city limits of Salem is one of the most haunted hotels in the United States. The Hawthorne Hotel sits at the heart of downtown Salem and features a beautiful, classic New England facade. It features 93 rooms and a selection of ghosts. Guests and hotel staff have reported events such as strange noises with no locatable source, disembodied voices, bed sheets being pulled by unseen hands, and even furniture being moved. An apparition in the form of a woman roams the halls and stares at herself in the mirror and near room 612. Guests in this room have reported feeling icy hands touching them, only to turn and find there's no one nearby. As chilling as those experiences are, it is said that room 325 is the most haunted, with guests reporting the sound of a disembodied baby crying, lights turning on and off, and faucets suddenly being turned on by unseen hands. The hotel's restaurant, the Tavern, features a display with a large ship's wheel which has been seen turning without any assistance, at least from any living person. One of the most unique experiences reported by both guests and staff over the years is the scent of apples which wafts through the hallways with no apparent source. These people are always shocked to discover that the hotel was built on land which was formerly an apple orchard. Across the globe in South Africa, the Nottingham Road Hotel provides Salem with some stiff competition when it comes to a supernatural hotel stay. Nicknamed Notty's Hotel, the property dates back to the mid-1800s. Countless guests and staff have reported seeing the ghost of a woman who appears to be carrying on in death as she did in life. Witness accounts say she has a habit of moving floral arrangements, putting clothes away, and tidying the beds. This ghost is known simply as Charlotte, and it is said she was once a chambermaid who either fell, jumped, or was pushed to her death from the balcony of room number 10, where her ghost is most often seen. Hotel Berciati in Florence, Italy, has a long history of notable guests, including poets, politicians, and famous opera performers. With guest rooms covered in frescoes, Hotel Berciati is recognized for its luxurious accommodations, with a side of spectral apparitions. Over the years, guests have reported the chilling sensation of an icy breath on their neck, whilst others have reported the ghost of a woman quietly sitting in a chair with her knitting, while a ghostly child skips up and down the halls. Back on the North American continent, Banff in Alberta, Canada is known for its stunning natural beauty. The Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel was originally built in 1888 in an effort to encourage travel to Canada's less populated western provinces, with the added goal of increasing train ticket sales. The castle-like structure sits within the limits of Banff National Park, nestled in the Rocky Mountains. The hotel's list of ghosts reads like the cast of characters from a television show. Firstly, there is Sam the Bellman Macaulay, an elderly Scotsman who worked in the hotel in the 1970s. He loved his job so much that while he was alive, he claimed he would return to haunt the hotel after his death. Sure enough, he has been seen helping guests with their bags, after which he promptly disappears, leaving the witnesses in a stunned and confused silence. There's even a tale of two women who called the front desk due to their room keys not working. After 15 minutes with no response, they proceeded to walk back to their room to wait in the hall. A moment later, a bellhop appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, and let them into their room. Upon inquiring at the front desk to thank the bellhop, they were told the only bellhop to match that description was the long-departed Sam. Other guests have witnessed Sam in his former office, which has since been converted into a guest room. Another less accommodating and far more tragic ghost is that of the bride. Guests and staff have been witnessing this apparition since the 1920s. The tale told is that she and her groom had travelled to the Banff Springs Hotel when it first opened, so they could be the first couple to get married at the location. As the bride was making her way down the stairs, under the proud and loving eyes of her groom and a room full of guests, she was startled by something unseen, lost her footing, and tumbled down the staircase, her body crash-landing on the floor. Tragically, she didn't survive the fall, and her spirit is often seen on the stairwell or gliding down the hallways in her long, lacy white wedding dress. Rhode Island, USA may not be the most common or famous tourist destination, unless your holiday involves delving into the paranormal. The Hotel Viking was built at the height of the roaring 1920s by the surrounding community who invested their own money into the project. However, from the beginning, guests and staff reported paranormal occurrences. One of the most common sightings is the ghost of a small boy who is seen sweeping the halls and scrubbing the floors in the oldest parts of the hotel, which seems to be the area where most of this activity is focused. There have also been multiple instances of staff reporting the sounds of loud and lavish parties, such as those that were held when the hotel first opened in the 1920s, at all hours of the night, only to find the ballroom empty and silent upon opening the doors to check. Across the Atlantic Ocean, in the Loire Valley of France, the Château de Marquet Hotel boasts one of the strangest and most frightening haunted hotel stories of all. Originally a 15th century castle, the Château de Marquet was converted to a 22-room hotel in 1973. Though its appearance is reminiscent of a fairy tale castle, the hotel holds a dark, sordid history within its walls. The legend states that a former lady resident would transform into a werewolf on a nightly basis until one night a terrified farmer shot her. When morning came, the farmer was faced with the body of a woman, not a wolf. Horrified, he secretly buried her on the property. To this day, guests and staff report seeing a ghostly woman gliding through the courtyard, up and down the halls. Made famous by Stephen King and the inspiration behind the Overlook Hotel in his book The Shining, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, USA sees countless visitors flock to it in hopes of having a paranormal experience. In Stephen King's own words, he tells of a lucid dream or nightmare he had while he and his wife were staying at the hotel in room 217. His dream featured a spine-chilling scene where a coiled fire hose chased his young son through the hotel's hallways as he ran, screaming, in an attempt to escape. It only took a few minutes after this dream for the famous author to conjure up a rough outline for The Shining before going back to bed. The hotel had built a reputation as a paranormal hotspot, with multiple frightening and unexplained events long before Stephen King's fateful visit. Things began after the terrible tragedy of 1911, in which, following a power outage caused by a flood, the hotel's owner, Freeland Stanley, decided to place a gas lantern in each room in case the power were to go out again. This way, the guests would have a backup source of light. Best laid plans and good intentions? Unfortunately for one chambermaid, his decision would prove to be life-altering. A leak from one of the lanterns caused gas to build up in one of the rooms, and a massive explosion ensued when a chambermaid by the name of Elizabeth Wilson entered with a candle in her hand. Elizabeth miraculously survived the explosion, though not all guests were so fortunate. Witnesses describe an entire bathtub being flung into the air by the force of the explosion. Oh, and the room where the explosion occurred? You guessed it, room 217, where Stephen King had the epiphany that inspired The Shining. Elizabeth, the chambermaid, carried on working at the hotel until the 1950s, and many guests believe her ghost inhabits room 217. Perhaps her spirit was imprinted into the space by the sheer shock she experienced that fateful day. Guests have reported the room being tidier upon waking than it was the night before, whilst others have said that they feel the bed being made while they were still in it. So maybe Elizabeth is simply carrying on her lifelong career as a chambermaid, only now she's doing it from the other side of the veil. The hotel offers nightly ghost tours and consultations with their on-site psychic, Madame Vera, whose office is located in the hotel's basement. Guests have reported a variety of phenomena, including piano music playing from unknown sources, objects being moved in their rooms, and the feeling of being touched when there is no one around. Whether these events are caused by Elizabeth alone, or the hotel is home to several entities, there is no doubt as to the fact that the odds are quite high guests will encounter something otherworldly while visiting the Stanley Hotel. Now we head south of the US border to Mexico. Mexico is known as a sunny, cheerful, entertaining and relaxing holiday destination for countless travelers flocking to a warmer climate in the winter months. However, if they book a room at El Hotel Maison de Hobito, they may be in for a chill. Hotel Maison de Hobito was originally built as a private residence in the early 1700s by a man named Don Hobito. After his wife died in childbirth, his wife's family decided to take his remaining children away, claiming Don Hobito didn't have an appropriate home for them. So, he built the house with the intention of giving them a spacious, beautiful, and safe place to live. However, when he returned to collect his children, they were nowhere to be found. Distraught, Don Hobito returned to the house he had built, and to avoid the aching loneliness that was setting in, he opened it up to weary travelers, many of whom were miners and merchants who would stay the night and let their animals rest before setting off the next day. Don Hobito's home was converted into a hotel in the mid-1990s, but don't let its brightly colored exterior and charming courtyard fool you. Guests have reported ghostly miners in search of gold, and the disembodied sound of children in the hall, as well as the sensation of children jumping on your bed, whilst others have heard hoofbeats on a dirt path when there are no horses around. The most haunted space, however, is Room 107, which is the room Don Hobito made his own after opening the house up to travelers. The activity in this room is said to be so intense that visitors have fled in the middle of the night. One of the most spine-tingling stories coming out of this location, though, involves the painted portrait of a small girl in a white dress. It is said the girl died in childhood, and as was customary at the time, her body was put into her finest dress and her hair and makeup done in preparation for the painting. The portrait hangs on the wall to this day, and guests report the girl in the painting changing positions, and sometimes even disappearing completely, only to return later on. Kalamazoo, Michigan, USA may not sound like the most popular tourist destination, but for some people looking for a fright or a potential supernatural occurrence, the Henderson Castle Inn may be worth considering. Established in 1895, the Henderson Castle Inn is a 25-room house with Queen Anne-style architecture that overlooks downtown Kalamazoo. The house took over a decade to build, as its owner Frank Henderson worked meticulously with surveyors, engineers, and landscape architects to build his dream home. Fate, however, was not on Frank's side, and he died only a few years after the project was complete. Perhaps this is the reason why Frank's ghost has chosen to linger and carry on, enjoying the house from beyond the grave. Since Henderson Castle opened as a public inn in 2011, multiple guests have reported seeing Frank in and around the property. The hotel has embraced both Frank and its reputation of being haunted, and hosts monthly murder mystery dinners which feature ghost-themed cocktails in its locally renowned Spirits Lounge. We've heard stories of ghostly miners and brides, but what about some of the more glitzy and glamorous ghosts? Look no further than the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in Los Angeles, California, USA. Home to the very first Academy Awards in 1929, the Hollywood Roosevelt has seen the likes of Clark Gable, Ernest Hemingway, Charlie Chaplin, and Shirley Temple come through its doors. Back in Hollywood's heyday, it wasn't uncommon for movie stars to spend extended periods of time living in hotels. At the Hollywood Roosevelt, one of those guests was none other than Marilyn Monroe, who lived there for over 2 years. She is now one of the hotel's most famous ghosts, as guests have reported seeing her apparition in the mirrors that hang in the room that she previously occupied. Room 928 apparently still holds the echoes of Montgomery Clift's voice and trumpet playing after he spent a considerable amount of time there while filming From Here to Eternity. Guests in this room have reported feeling watched, with one woman even claiming she felt him tuck her into bed. The most adventurous Hollywood Roosevelt ghost, however, is that of Errol Flynn, who is often spotted in and around the ballroom, at the piano, or by the hotel's swimming pool in the form of a ghostly shadow. Though this wasn't the case for the Hollywood Roosevelt, many hotels previously served other purposes prior to being converted. One such hotel is Parador de Jaén in Spain. This former 18th century Arab fortress provides scenic views as the Andalusian landscape. Within the hotel walls, however, guests can still hear echoes of the building's dark and storied past. One of the hotel's ghosts appears to have taken residence in what was originally Room 22, where guests were awakened by the sound of a woman weeping and fervent knocking on the door. Though no one has heard the weeping since, guests in this room have reported furniture and personal belongings being moved by unseen hands, as well as cold spots and shadowy figures. Some say the ghost is that of a woman who took her own life after having her heart broken. However, others speculate she was the mistress of the castle's lord and held considerable power and influence over him. Threatened, the king ordered her to be killed, and a mob of men ambushed her and burned her alive. Given those circumstances, it wouldn't be unlikely that her shocked and angered ghost would remain on site. Another entity on the premises has been named Terrible Legato, which translates to terrible lizard. He is said to be a prisoner who suffered a slow, painful death by starvation while imprisoned in the fortress. His ghost wanders the halls, waiting for unsuspecting guests to let their guard down, at which point he possesses them for a spell. Now, many people try to rationalize their fear of small enclosed spaces, such as elevators, but at the Bowery Hotel in New York City's vibrant Lower East Side, that fear is very well founded. It is said that a poltergeist-type entity has taken to playing tricks with the hotel's elevators, sending them up and down to various floors in the middle of the night. The Bowery is located in a lavish 19th century building, decorated in Art Deco style with a strong Gothic influence, complete with red velvet drapes and spooky oil paintings. This, of course, sets the scene perfectly for some sort of paranormal event to occur. Adding to the mystique, it is thought that the hotel was built over some of the oldest graves originally belonging to the nearby New York Marble Cemetery, though you'd never guess it, while sitting under fairy lights strung above the quaint patio. Guests have reported events such as drinks being spilled on them by invisible hands, and full-body apparitions greeting them upon entering their rooms. One of the most troubled and disturbing spirits at the Bowery is that of Annie Moore, a prostitute who worked at a nearby brothel. She was brutally murdered in 1906, her body mutilated and her throat slashed, a murder that still remains unsolved to this day. Her spirit roams the halls and courtyard, perhaps looking for some form of justice or peace. One of the most haunted rooms at the Bowery is the lavishly decorated event room. Boasting a private entrance, fireplace, and outdoor terrace, the event room has been the location of multiple weddings, galas, and photo shoots. However, many of these events have been attended by an uninvited guest. One of the most haunted rooms at the Bowery is the lavishly decorated event room. Boasting a private entrance, fireplace, and outdoor terrace, the event room has been the location of multiple weddings, galas, and photo shoots. However, many of these events have been attended by an uninvited guest. Thought to be caused by the same poltergeist-type entity that moves the elevators, guests have reported objects moving of their own volition and lights being turned on and off in the middle of celebrations. From New York City, we go to the opposite coast of America to visit what is arguably one of the country's most famous haunted accommodations, the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, California. Our Talk Haunts guest, Gail Porter, mentioned her own personal paranormal experience at this location while she was filming the TV show Dead Famous. It was an encounter that completely changed her perception of the paranormal. Many guests of the Del, as it is often referred to, have reported unusual flickering lights, cold spots, disembodied voices and footsteps, doors slamming and the like. But it's the tragic story of a woman named Kate Morgan that gives the hotel its haunted reputation. Kate Morgan checked into the Del in 1892 under an assumed name. A few days later, her body was discovered on the hotel's exterior staircase with a gunshot wound to the head. The coroner determined the wound was self-inflicted, though many were not convinced by his assessment. Kate's ghost has lingered at the hotel ever since, remaining close to her original guest room, 3327. Those who've seen her apparition claim she looks rather melancholic as she stares wistfully out of the window in her Victorian dress. Whilst some hotels shy away from their haunted reputations for fear of scaring away potential guests, others embrace and lean into it. Such is the case for the Black Monarch Hotel in Victor, Colorado, USA. Victor, Colorado was a thriving town during the gold rush of the 1890s. At its origins, the building on the site that would eventually house the Black Monarch Hotel served as a brothel and saloon until it burned down in 1899. Some of the ghosts in the hotel seem to date from its previous existence, as staff report instances of women laughing and silhouettes in the windows when there is no one around. At least, no one living, that is. One of the ghosts thought to inhabit the building is that of a barkeeper from the hotel's early days who died in a gunfight. But the cast of characters haunting this area isn't relegated strictly to the hotel. Rather, it is thought to encompass the entire town, which has a long and dark history. At its peak during the gold rush, the town was filled with miners and bordello sex workers. Wealthy mine owners, feeling threatened by the miners' attempts to organize for better working conditions and fair pay, would go to great lengths to have them silenced, going so far as to order train derailments, arson, beatings, and even murders. It's not surprising, given this history, that the town finds itself ripe with lingering spirits. As for the Black Monarch Hotel, it has quite happily expanded upon its haunted reputation by sharing ghost stories on its website and catering to lovers of all things dark and paranormal, with black painted walls, Gothic-style decor, and rooms named after famous spooky historical figures such as Bela Lugosi's Dracula room and even the Jack the Ripper room. In stark contrast to the dark walls of the Black Monarch is the pristine white exterior of Denmark's Dragsholm Castle. But don't let that fool you. The hotel has a very dark side and boasts multiple spirits. It is said to be both the oldest and most haunted location in Denmark. Dating back nearly 800 years, Dragsholm Castle's list of ghosts is lengthy, with some estimating that nearly 100 entities haunt the property. One of the most often reported apparitions is that of a prisoner from the 1500s when the castle served as a prison for noble and ecclesiastical prisoners. Another frequently seen spirit is that of a bishop who was imprisoned in the castle tower during the same era. Guests who've hired rooms in this converted part of the hotel have reported hearing disembodied moaning and wailing in the hallways. Another famous ghost is that of James Hepburn, an earl who was engaged to marry a Danish-Norwegian woman. Instead, he decided to return to Scotland to wed Mary, Queen of Scots. However, the Danish woman's family had provided a sizable dowry, which he took back with him to Scotland. James was later accused of murdering the second husband of the Scottish Queen and made the fatal mistake of fleeing to Denmark to escape prosecution. The father of the woman he had been engaged to had him arrested and made sure that his time in prison was as torturous as possible. James was in his mid-40s when he finally drew his last breath, chained to the wall inside his prison cell. James's ghost is often seen wandering the hotel's hallways or riding a ghostly horse-drawn carriage through what was once the castle gate. His mummified body is still housed at a church in close proximity to the castle. The hotel is also home to the devastated ghost of a young noble woman who had the misfortune of falling in love with a commoner. Her father, angered beyond words, had her immured. Her body was discovered centuries later during renovations, still donning a white dress. Her ghost, nicknamed the Woman in White, is seen wandering the halls in search of her lost love. Guests have reported feeling a depth of sadness and heaviness when they encounter her. Countless guests flock to Florida, USA, in search of beaches, sun, and a nice, relaxing holiday. For the guests of the Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables, however, the holiday may not be as restful as they hope. In its heyday during the Roaring Twenties, the Biltmore Hotel was a Miami hotspot that hosted lavish events ranging from galas to fashion shows. It enjoyed a solid reputation for glitz and glamour until one fateful day in 1929 when a mobster by the name of Thomas Fatty Walsh was murdered on the 13th floor. Shortly after the murder, guests began reporting paranormal activity, with several people witnessing his ghosts wandering the halls near the room where he was killed. With the start of World War II, the Biltmore catered to shifting needs and became a military hospital, where it saw a lot of trauma and death. It went through a few more changes before finally being abandoned in 1968 and eventually renovated to its former glory as a hotel in the mid-1980s. Hotel guests still claim to see the ghost of Fatty Walsh roaming the halls, and multiple people claim the elevator stops at the 13th floor, unsolicited, with the doors refusing to close. Fatty Walsh isn't the only resident ghost, however. There are multiple reports of a ghostly elevator operator in an old-fashioned uniform who vanishes once guests arrive at their destination. Back in New York City, the Hotel Chelsea has long held a reputation for its comprehensive list of famous guests, many of whom would stay for extended periods of time, sometimes spanning several years. Of particular interest to the more creative types, some of the Chelsea Hotel's most notable residents include Mark Twain, Stanley Kubrick, Andy Warhol, and Patti Smith. These aren't the only famous residents of the hotel, however, as it boasts several famous ghosts as well. One of these is a woman named Mary, who survived the sinking of the Titanic, but never recovered from the pain of losing her husband in the tragedy, and eventually hanged herself in her hotel room. She is said to haunt the 5th floor to this day, imposing a feeling of sadness and despair on guests who stay in her former room. Then there's the ghost of Nadia. Nadia was the daughter of a wealthy merchant whose family had taken residence in one of the Chelsea's most upscale suites. She was an aspiring artist, but her plans fell to the side when she fell in love and eloped with a musician and songwriter. The couple's happiness was short-lived, however, as Nadia's husband spiraled into alcoholism and eventually abandoned her and their 2 children. Nadia returned to her family's home at the Chelsea and begged her father to let her live with them. He agreed on the condition that she would work full-time in addition to doing house chores to earn her keep. Between this and being a mother, Nadia no longer had the time for her art, and with her life void of hope, dreams and love, things became unbearable. One day, unable to take it anymore, she jumped out of her hotel window, crashing to her death on the sidewalk below. Her spirit is said to still roam both the hallways of the hotel and the sidewalk where she died. Like it is as hard to imagine the inner workings of a swan's feet, madly paddling as one watches it glide across the water in a seemingly effortless way, it's hard to imagine that behind the fairy tale-esque setting of Sweden's Toftaholm Herrgård Hotel, there is a dark, sordid story. Surrounded by meadows and lakes in the idyllic Småland countryside, the Toftaholm Herrgård Hotel started out as a manor house which was home to a baron and his family. According to local legend, the baron's daughter was conducting a love affair with a young man named Mats. When their affair was discovered, her father forbade her to ever see him again and arranged for her to be married to a wealthier man. Devastated and heartbroken, Mats hanged himself from the rafters now located in the hotel's room 324. Guests of the hotel claim to see his ghost wandering the grounds, searching for the love of his life. Others report doors and windows opening and closing on their own, and strange, unexplained sounds coming from room 324. One of the most unusual haunted hotels we've come across is actually a retired ocean liner. The Queen Mary, anchored in Long Beach, California, USA, is said to host a collection of ghostly guests who never seem to want to check out. The Queen Mary served as a cruise ship starting in the mid-1930s. From the time it set sail to the time it was converted to a hotel in 1972, the Queen Mary saw 49 deaths occur on board. It's no surprise, then, that hotel guests report seeing the ghosts of various passengers and crew members dating from its days as a cruise ship. Some of these ghosts include a crew member who was crushed by a watertight door in the engine room, and a little girl who is thought to have drowned in one of the pools. One of the most famously haunted rooms is B340, where a British passenger drew his last breath in the late 1940s. Guests in this room claim to hear knocking on their door in the middle of the night, and have had the blankets pulled off them only to look up in shock and find a ghostly figure looking down at them from the foot of the bed. Other guests have reported various paranormal phenomena such as shadowy figures, disembodied footsteps, cold spots, and a deep sense of unease that seems to arise immediately upon setting foot inside the hotel. Our last stop is the aptly named Jekyll Island Club on Jekyll Island in the state of Georgia, USA. The building was once a hunting club for the wealthy toward the end of the 19th century. Over the decades that followed, it became one of the most exclusive resorts in the world, boasting members with lavish reputations and famous family names such as Vanderbilt and Rockefeller. The club also holds the claim to fame of being the location of the first transcontinental phone call to Alexander Graham Bell. Unfortunately, the Jekyll Island Club was not able to survive the Great Depression and World War II, and it eventually saw itself converted into a hotel which opened to the public in the 1980s. Since then, several guests have claimed to encounter the ghosts of famous historical characters. One of these ghosts is that of railroad magnate Samuel Spencer, who was killed in a railroad accident in 1906. It is said he had a ritual of reading the Wall Street Journal every morning while sipping his coffee. Guests of the hotel often report their newspaper being found in disarray first thing in the morning, as though it has already been read, with some also noticing their cups of coffee drained of their contents while they stepped away just for a moment. Others claim to have seen Spencer's apparition seated at a table reading his favorite newspaper with a cup of coffee by his side. Another famous former resident of the hotel who appears to have lingered is none other than renowned financier J.P. Morgan. Several guests have reported the smell of cigar smoke emanating from the nearby Sansuchi cottage that sits on the hotel's grounds, a place where J.P. Morgan often stayed while on holiday. And that, dear listeners, brings us to the end of this episode. Though we feel we are left with more questions than answers, many of these stories seem to involve a replay of past events, which perhaps give credence to the stone tape theory. Or maybe, in a sense, many of these experiences could be chalked up to time slips. It's hard not to notice similarities in the hauntings from all around the world. Ghosts tied to specific rooms or locations, similar types of tragedies leaving an imprint on the space, events from the past replaying on a loop. The more we discover, the more it makes us yearn to understand the inner workings of the paranormal. But one thing is certain. Whether you believe any of these stories or not, if you find yourself at a seaside resort, a famous converted castle, or a popular downtown hotel, make sure you learn a little about its history before you go. Otherwise, the next person to have a haunted holiday could be you.